The fire had shrunk to a few stubborn embers, barely casting enough light to make out the figure across from me. The cabin felt smaller with each flicker of flame, the cold pressing in through cracks in the walls. Outside, the wind screamed, rattling the windows like something desperate to be let in. But it wasn't the storm that had me on edge. It was him. The figure sat across from me, shrouded in darkness, his features shifting with every flicker of the fire. His eyes, though, those stayed the same, dark, impossibly deep, pulling me into their depths. Eyes that seemed to know everything I wanted to forget.
I know why you've come. You want to talk about evil, correct?
His voice was smooth, like velvet sliding over a blade. I swallowed, the tightness in my throat making it hard to breathe. I had come to this cabin looking for answers, for some kind of peace, but now that I was face to face with him, I wasn't so sure I wanted to hear what he had to say.
You've been running from it long enough, Thomas. Time to let it breathe.
The words settled over me like a weight, heavy and suffocating. The truth was there, just beneath the surface, clawing its way out. But I didn't want to face it. Not yet. I stared into the embers, the dull glow of the fire doing nothing to warm the chill creeping up my spine. I don't understand how it happens. My voice came out weak, unfamiliar. How someone changes, how they can become...
That?
The figure leaned forward slightly, the corners of his mouth curving into a smile that didn't reach his eyes.
It's not about how. It's about when. When will you finally admit what you're capable of?
The room seemed to shrink even more, the walls pressing in on me. I shifted in my seat, trying to find a way to distance myself from him, from his eyes, but there was nowhere to go. Guilt, which had been a dull ache for years, suddenly felt unbearable, like it was tightening around my chest, making it hard to breathe. I wasn't born for that, I said, the words barely a whisper. I didn't choose it.
But you were capable of it.
His voice held a dangerous edge, like he was savoring each word.
That's what you're really asking yourself, isn't it? How a good man can turn into something darker.
I closed my eyes, trying to block out the images flooding my mind. Blood, the screams, the faces of the people I had. I clenched my hands into fists, nails digging into my palms. I wasn't like the others. I had held on longer, hadn't I? I wasn't like them, I murmured, more to myself than to him. I tried to hold on. The figure stood, moving to the window with a fluid grace that sent a shiver down my spine. He looked out at the storm, the wind howling like a beast outside. But it felt like the real storm was inside, swirling around me.
Man is not inherently evil,
he said, his voice soft, almost contemplative.
But man is malleable. Fear, power, authority. Strip away his comforts, his safety, and what's left? Only instinct.
I stayed silent, the truth of his words settling over me like a shroud. I had seen it. I had lived it.
You put a man in a cage, tell him it's for his own good, and soon he'll believe it. Tell him his enemy is less than human, and not only will he believe it, he'll relish it.
The fire crackled, the embers flaring briefly before dimming again. I thought of the men I had served with, the way they'd changed, how easily they'd fallen into the violence, how they'd reveled in it. I had told myself I was different. I wasn't like them, but the truth gnawed at me. I shook my head, trying to push the thoughts away. We have morals and decency.
Morals? Decency? Those are mere luxuries. Things you hold on to until the right pressure is applied. War, survival, the need to belong. They crumble under those forces, and then...
He smiled, sharp and cold.
Then man is free to do what he's always been capable of.
My stomach churned. I had seen men crumble, seen the light leave their eyes as they gave in, and I had told myself I was different. But had I been? No, I said, shaking my head, my voice trembling. I'm not like that. I'm not...
Aren't you?
His voice was soft, almost pitying.
What about that night in the village? The one you can't stop dreaming about. What did you do when they handed you the rifle and told you to clear the house,
I felt my heart stutter in my chest. I didn't want to think about it, but the memory clawed its way back, pulling me under. The villagers, the children, the blood. I didn't have a a choice, I whispered, my hands trembling. They said it was for the greater good.
There's always a choice.
The figure crouched in front of me now, his face inches from mine, his presence cold, suffocating.
You just didn't like the alternatives.
I pressed my hands to my temples, trying to block out the memories, but they crashed over me, relentless. The woman shielding her children, the boy crying for his father, my finger squeezing the trigger.
You hesitated, didn't you? For just a second. But then, you obeyed.
I had hesitated, only for a moment, but I had.
That's all it takes.
His smile returned, chilling.
One moment where the line between right and wrong blurs. After that, it's easy.
I clenched my fists, my nails biting into my skin. The truth was suffocating. I had pulled the trigger. I had watched them fall. And in that moment, the darkness had felt easy. So what does that make me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Am I damned? The figure stood, his cold amusement never fading. He chuckled, a sound colder than the storm outside.
No, Thomas, you're not damned. You're just human.
His words lingered in the air, filling the room with a truth I couldn't escape. I had come here looking for absolution, but what I found was worse than I had feared. Devil doesn't make monsters. We do that ourselves. The embers were almost gone now, the last traces of warmth fading into ash. I could feel the cold creeping in, the wind howling louder, as if the storm itself were seeping into the cabin. The figure remained where he was, crouched in front of me, eyes fixed on mine, relentless. I shifted in my seat, trying to create distance, but the truth he had spoken already had its claws in me. There was no getting away from it now.
You want to talk about choice?
His voice was softer, more intimate, as if he were speaking directly into my thoughts.
Let's talk about that moment. The one you can't stop reliving in your nightmares. You stood there with that rifle in your hands, and they begged you for mercy.
My heart raced, the images flashing behind my eyes. The ruined village, the broken homes, the fear in their eyes. I could smell the smoke, hear the distant gunfire, and feel the weight of the rifle in my hands. I had hesitated. I had wanted to believe I could resist, but the orders came again, and I pulled the trigger. The figure leaned closer, his cold breath brushing against my skin.
Tell me, when you pulled that trigger, did it feel good?
I shook my head violently, my voice catching in my throat. No, I didn't want to.
You did, for just a moment. You felt that rush, that power. The knowledge that you held their lives in your hands. Don't lie to yourself. You felt it.
I recoiled, my hands trembling as I clenched my fists tighter. He was right. There had been a moment, just a flicker, where I had felt it. The power, the control, and it terrified me.
That's why you can't forget,
he said, standing again, his voice dripping with satisfaction.
It's not the act itself that haunts you. It's what it awoke in you, the part of you that liked it. That's why the guilt is eating you alive, not because of what you did, but because of how it made you feel.
I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out his words, but they twisted inside me like barbed wire. I had tried to forget. I had tried to drown the memories in alcohol, bury them beneath years of silence, but they always resurfaced. Relentless, unforgiving. I could see their faces, hear their cries, the woman shielding her children, the boy sobbing for his father. I had pulled the trigger, and in that moment something inside me had changed. I wasn't born for this, I whispered, though the words felt hollow. I didn't want it.
No, you didn't want it. But when the time came, you still chose it. You pulled the trigger. You embraced the darkness. And now you'll carry that weight forever.
His words sank into me like stones, dragging me deeper into the truth I had been running from for so long. I had made my choices. I had pulled the trigger. And now I would live with that darkness, that guilt for the rest of my life. There was no absolution waiting for me, only this, an endless, heavy burden.
You can't outrun the darkness,
the figure said, stepping closer once more, his voice low and almost gentle.
You can't run away. It's the real you.
I looked down at my hands, my fingers trembling from the weight of everything I had done. The fire had dimmed to nothing but ash. The room cold and dark. I felt hollow. I had spent years trying to outrun the guilt, to escape the memories, but it had all been for nothing. The truth was, the darkness was inside me. It had always been there, lurking beneath the surface. "I'll carry it," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "I'll live with the guilt. That's my punishment, my penance."
You think bearing it will be enough? You think you can carry it and still survive? You're fooling yourself. The darkness doesn't just go away. It waits. It waits for a moment of weakness, and when you least expect it, it'll take you.
I stood slowly, the weight of everything pressing down on me, but I held my ground. He was right. The darkness would always be there. The guilt, the shame, the memories. They would never leave me, but I couldn't let it consume me. Not again. "I'm not running anymore," I said, my voice stronger this time. The figure tilted his head, watching me closely, his dark eyes gleaming with something unreadable.
Are you even strong enough to carry it, and much less to live with it?
I didn't answer. I didn't know if I was strong enough. I didn't know if I could carry the weight of my actions, to live with the choices I had made, but I knew I had to try. I couldn't run anymore. Not from this. The figure's smile grew colder, more menacing.
We will see.
The storm outside raged, the wind battering the walls of the cabin, the rain lashing against the windows. I stood in the dim light, feeling the weight of my guilt pressing down on me. And for the first time in years, I didn't try to run from it. I didn't try to bury it, but I knew deep down that the darkness would always be there, lurking beneath the surface. The fire had gone out completely now. The room plunged into darkness, but it was nothing compared to the storm brewing inside me. I stood there, my body heavy with the weight of everything I had been avoiding for so long. The guilt, the memories, the darkness inside me. The figure hadn't moved. He stood in the shadows, his presence still looming over me, like something ancient and inevitable. His words lingered in the air between us, the finality of them sinking in.
You think you can carry that guilt, bear the weight of your sins, and walk away from this?
I don't have a choice. I have to carry it. That's my punishment. That's how I'll atone.
Atonement? You think this is atonement? No, Thomas. You're just trying to survive. You're just trying to keep your head above water. But you're drowning in this guilt, and sooner or later, you'll slip under.
He took a step closer, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous light.
But there's another way.
I froze. What? What do you mean? The figure circled around me slowly like a predator sizing up its prey. His voice was calm, soothing even, but beneath it was something predatory, something hungry.
You could let it go. All of it. The guilt, the shame, the endless weight of those memories that haunt you. You don't have to carry this burden. You don't have to live with it.
How do I do that?
All you have to do is accept it. Accept that the darkness is a part of you. Stop fighting it. Stop pretending you're something you're not. The power you felt when you pulled that trigger, it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some aberration. It was who you really are.
No, that's not...
Yes, you are. Stop running from this. This is your true nature. It's in your blood. You've felt it. The power, the control. You've always wanted it, and you'll want it now more than ever.
My chest tightened, my mind racing. He was offering me something. An escape. An end to the guilt. But at what cost? I could feel the darkness closing in, pressing against me, threatening to swallow me whole. Could I really live with this guilt forever? Could I really bear this weight for the rest of my life?
You don't have to be consumed by it. You can control it. You can use it. Stop feeling like a victim and become something stronger. All you have to do is let go.
The storm outside seemed to grow louder, the wind howling through the cracks in the walls. I could feel the pull of his words, the temptation gnawing at me. A way out, a release from the constant torment. All I had to do was accept it, accept that the darkness was a part of me, that the power I had felt when I pulled that trigger wasn't something to fear. I took a step back, my heart pounding. No, I can't. The figure's eyes narrowed, his smile fading.
You think you're strong enough. You think living with your guilt will somehow make you noble. You're just delaying the inevitable. Sooner or later, the weight will crush you. And when that happens, the darkness will win. I will win.
I swallowed hard, my throat dry. His words cut deep. And for a moment, I didn't know what to say. He was offering me an easy way out. A way to stop the pain, stop the guilt. But I couldn't, could I? I looked at the door, the storm still raging outside. The wind was fierce, battering the cabin with a force that felt almost primal. And beyond it, the unknown. My escape. I turned back to the figure. His eyes were fixed on mine, waiting. I could feel the choice hanging in the air. Heavy, suffocating. I could walk away, try to live with the weight of my actions. Or I could let go, accept the darkness, and free myself from the guilt that had been consuming me for years. My hand hovered over the door handle, cold metal biting into my palm. I paused, my breath catching in my throat. I could feel the weight of it all pressing down on me. And for a moment, I wasn't sure if I could take another step.
Make your choice, but know this. You'll never escape me. I'll always be here, waiting for you.
I could feel the darkness pulling at me, tempting me, offering me a way out, but I didn't know if I could trust myself to resist it forever. Slowly, I opened the door. The storm hit me like a wave, cold and fierce, but I stepped into it, the wind whipping against my skin, the rain soaking through my clothes. I didn't look back. I kept walking, the wind and rain tearing at me, the darkness inside me still there, still lurking. I didn't know if I could carry this weight forever. I didn't know if I could resist the pull of the darkness. Tonight I had made my choice, but tomorrow is still uncertain,